Mathematics did not begin with the Greeks, even the Greeks say so. Geometry was an African invention. And Pythagoras admitted as much. And so did everybody who came after him. We find in the Rind mathematical papyrus, we find formulas for the area of the rectangle, which is problem number 6. This is the Rind mathematical papyrus. There are, I think, 4 mathematical papyri that have been discovered. One is the Moscow mathematical papyrus, showing you the area of a rectangle, or the formula for obtaining the area of a rectangle, A equals L times B. This is problem number 14 of the Moscow papyrus. This is the formula for finding the volume of a truncated pyramid. Now, the volume for a truncated pyramid gives you volume equals height, 1/3 the height, times a squared, ab plus b squared. This is actually more difficult than finding the volume of the total pyramid. This is problem number 56, also from the Rind mathematical papyrus. This is a problem that allows them to demonstrate how to find the slope of the pyramid. And in this problem, they actually deal with cotangents, showing that they had also not only begun their studies in geometry, but also in trigonometry as well. Among these ancient people of the Nile, these ancient black peoples of the Nile, we find the first evidence of algebra, because in the Rind mathematical papyruses, number 24 to 27, are algebraic equations of the first degree. They also handled algebraic equations of the second degree. Algebra is basically, if you have to strip it down to its essentials, its ability to solve problems when you have an unknown. Now, we call that unknown usually X or Y. The ancient Kamites used to call it a quantity. This is the interior portion of the cranium, which was described by the ancient Kamites. I might just mention that they described the results of what happens to injuries to the temporal portion of the brain. The physicians in the room know that in the front part of the temporal portion of the brain is Broca's area, controlling articulate speech. Behind Broca is Wernicke's area, controlling processing and understanding of sounds and language. You get a lesion or an injury to the Broca's area, you get expressive aphasia. To Wernicke's area is receptive aphasia. Expressive aphasia means you slur your words. Receptive aphasia means that you can't understand what's being said to you, so you speak in meaningless babble. But the ancient Egyptians, and by the way, an injury to both, you can get injury to both, which is total or mixed aphasia. The ancient Egyptians describing this in the Edmund Smith papyrus. So they have not only described the sort of macro surface of the brain, they had described the cortical functions of certain areas of the brain nearly 4,000 years before Broca's experiments 120 years ago, 130 years ago.
Egyptians first and then deal with Africans outside of Egypt. The Egyptians were the first, according to Herodotus, to have specialists for every organ. They were the first to have pharmacies because they found standardized doses. They were the first to have a state medicine. Their doctors were paid by the state. And we have found 10 medical texts, in spite of massive destruction, 10 medical texts survive. The Ebers papyrus and the Edwin Smith papyrus, 1500 BC, 2600 BC.
But where are the books, they say? The earliest books in the world are African. The Book of the Dead, or rather it should be called the Book of the Coming Forth by Night and Day. The pyramid texts, the Papyrus of Ani. You will hear tomorrow from Dr. Ben the profound impact of those books upon the thinking of the Greeks. Look at the medical literature of the world. They said the clinical method began with the Greeks. It did not. You can read the Edwin Smith papyrus. Dr. Finch, whom you will hear tomorrow, Dr. Finch has done a commentary recently for the journal on the Edwin Smith Papyrus, showing it is only 1/3 of an earlier manuscript written down in the 18th dynasty by a surgeon in Egypt, and that it only deals with the head and neck and the brain. Yet there are 200 terms. There are 200 medical terms for things inside and outside the head. He said that they discovered in that very early time things which we only know today through X-rays. He said that they found the locus in the brain through which auditory information is processed. They were working on pulse taking 1,000 years before Herophilus, the Greek who was credited with pulse taking.
It is in ancient Cam, 6,000 years ago, that the first systematic studies of cardiovascular circulation and cardiovascular physiology began. There is something called the Edwin Smith Surgical Papyrus, about 6,000 years old, which I call the founding document of scientific medicine, in which are described the heart as the center of the circulatory system, the major vessels going out of the heart and into the periphery and into the vital organs, the movement of blood out of the heart, the phenomenon of pulsation that occurs as a result of the movement of blood outside the heart, the measuring of the pulse itself, which Hippocrates, by the way, did not do, the understanding a relationship between the heart and the lung, heart and the kidneys, and even the heart and the liver. The physicians in the room know what I mean when I talk about passive congestion of the liver as a result of congestive heart failure. Ancient Egyptians described that. They described angina pectoris. They even described Stokes-Adams attacks. What is the Stokes-Adams attack? Some people can get heart dysrhythmias. Those dysrhythmias cause a slowing down of blood to the brain, and the person can pass out. Simply put, the ancient Egyptians describe that not only in the not in the Edwin Smith Papyrus, but in the Ebers Papyrus. So that cardiovascular physiology and cardiovascular pathology and cardiovascular medicine begins in Africa 6,000 years ago. And I think Johns Hopkins is one of the world's centers of cardiovascular medicine, if I'm not mistaken. Don't even know it. They owe a debt to ancient black people living on the Nile 6,000 years ago.
Remember when we were younger, we would hear some interesting tidbit about someone black who had invented something or done something significant in history, and we would wonder aloud, wow, I wonder why they don't teach us that in school. Well, I would argue some decades later that we're in no better position now with regards to our mainstream educational system and what it teaches our young people and our not so young people about our history. You know, Carter G. Woodson, the author of the book, The Miseducation of the Negro, asserts that a man receives two educations, one that is given to him and the other that he gives to himself. Well, if we're about to take the long journey into looking into the historical contributions of people of African descent, where will we begin? I mean, what have we done? What have we contributed to world civilization in the areas of mathematics, science, architecture, astrology, astronomy, medicine? If we wanted to find out, where would we begin? Well, we can begin in the most ancient of days. We can begin with an African, a multi-genius of a man. His name, Imhotep.
Imhotep was the first multidimensional character in human history. There was no personality in human history that we can read about, that's written about before Imhotep, a black man. The first person with texture in human history. In other words, everybody before that was mentioned, you mentioned the name. You had the name of kings. You had their name, but you did not have any details about them. The first person we have details about in history is a black man, Imhotep.
Imhotep, the father of medicine and a black multi-genius. The achievements of the black people of ancient Egypt have shown us that black people built truly one of the greatest civilizations of ancient times. But do you know that a person generally regarded as the most talented individual in the history of the ancient world was a black man? He was an Egyptian named Imhotep. Imhotep was the son of an architect. He lived during the reign of King Zoser of Egypt in 2980 BC. He was an exceptionally brilliant man. He was versed in medicine, architecture, engineering, philosophy, poetry, religion, and astronomy. It is through his work and writings that the Western world first learned of the existence of objective and scientific medicine based on the repeated and careful observation of a patient. It is said also that Imhotep knew about the circulation of the blood. He discovered this at least 4,000 years before it was known in Europe. Imhotep diagnosed and treated more than 200 diseases. These included disorders of the eyes, bladder, abdomen, and skin. Imhotep's contribution to the development of medical knowledge in the ancient world was such that the Greeks worshipped him as the father of medicine and their god of healing. Today, Western civilization holds to the belief that the Greek Hippocrates was the father of medicine. Yet, the Hippocratic oath taken by every medical doctor in Western civilization pays homage to the god Apollo and the father of medicine, Asclepius, which incidentally was the Greek name for Imhotep.
Not attacking the Greeks because they had their own genius too, but the basis, all these things they claimed, you see, Hippocrates, taking sections out of the work of earlier Egyptian writers without giving any credit to them at all. Pythagoras, the Pythagorean theorem was worked out long ago. Pythagoras spent 7 years, some people say 22 in Egypt. And he comes back with all this, even medical theories, and brings it all back to Greece and all the claim. All the great European scholars went to Africa. Thales of Miletus, Democritus, Pythagoras, Eudoxus. There's a whole list of them walking into Africa, picking up things from astronomy, geometry, medicine, etc., and going back home and claiming it to be theirs. Father of this and father of that, when they're the children. We are doing this because it is necessary to revise the history of man. The tremendous anguish which is deep in the heart of all of us, which arises out of these falsehoods, the falsehoods upon which this civilization are built, have got to go.